This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 902 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Thanks for tuning in. The NFL season starts in just a couple of days. We're officially back. That means that this 15 Transactions podcast is going to hit your ears every Tuesday morning for the next 4 months. For those of you who are newer to the show, 15 Transactions, it's a column that I've been writing for basically a third of my life now. Each week, I talk through players that I'm looking to buy, sell, add, and drop in fantasy football. Now, 2 things to keep in mind with this show, 2 caveats. I call this out each year, but they're important things to say. First, if a player is a buy, let's say, it doesn't mean that you need to buy them for absolutely anything. I'm just giving you a recommendation based on how I think the market is viewing a player. Every Tuesday morning, I also publish my rest of season rankings over on Patreon. So you can always see how I view a player based on those rankings and tiers. Now, second, you guys, I try to walk through my analysis with as much sincerity as possible. This podcast each week is what I call my brain vomit. I'm just taking what's in my head and making it as actionable as possible. I'm not hiding anything from anyone. And I'm not shying away from my takes. I'm going to get plenty wrong with these recommendations each and every week. The goal is not to bat 1,000 because that's impossible. It's just to provide an edge, to provide some value. That's how it goes with fantasy football. So as this season moves forward, yes, I'm fully aware I'm going to get things wrong. And I'm saying that because at the end of the season, at the end of the year, once January hits and we're not worried about managing our fantasy squads, I will do an episode on the things that went right and the things that went wrong in the fantasy football season, the one that we just completed. I do that every single year. So there's no need to go back and forth on JJ got this right and JJ got this wrong when it's week 6 of this NFL season. It does not matter to me. All that matters is that I'm giving you the goods, that I'm helping you win a fantasy football title. That's all I care about in season. We can save all of the you got this right and you got this wrong stuff for the end of the year. At the very least, though, with this show, I hope this episode each week makes you think and learn. That's what this is all about to me. It's why I show my work, because the thought process behind all of this is arguably more important than the action item itself. So keep all of that in mind as you listen each week. Now, before getting into the transactions this week, keep in mind that if you do want a copy of the late round draft guide still, that Underdog promo is going to be running through the end of the week. Just sign up at underdogfantasy.com with promo code LATEROUND, make a deposit, and you'll be emailed a copy of the late round draft guide for absolutely free. You'll also be able to take advantage of some Underdog offers as well. There's a deposit bonus, but there's also No Sweat Tuesday, where there's a No Sweat token waiting for you in your lobby. Just make a qualifying entry and you'll either win or get your money back as bonus cash with that token. So check it all out, underdogfantasy.com, and when you sign up, make sure you use promo code LATEROUND. Now let's get to the first list of transactions for this 2024 season. Buy Jordan Love. So you've heard me talk all offseason about the importance of mobile quarterbacks. I talk about it every offseason. I wrote about it at length in the late round draft guide. Jordan Love, though, he's not exactly a mobile quarterback. He rushed for fewer than 250 yards last year. He's not Lamar Jackson with his legs. He has some ability as a rusher, but he's mostly a pocket passer archetype. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible for him to score fantasy points. And like I talked about in the bold predictions episode, he could score a lot of points during the first half of the season. Because the Packers open up their year against the Eagles, and then they get the Colts, Titans, Vikings, Rams, Cardinals, Texans, and Jags. According to PFF's preseason secondary rankings, only 2 of those teams rank better than 26th as a unit. Those 2 teams come in at 15th and 18th. We always want appreciating assets in fantasy football. Love was drafted on average around that QB9 range. A lot of drafts saw Dak Prescott get drafted ahead of Love. There's a very real chance, though, that Jordan Love is a top 5 quarterback through the front half of this season. That's why he's a buy. Sell Zamir White. Now look, anyone who's read the late round draft guide, who's listened to this late round podcast over the summer, you know that Zamir White is not my guy this year. He was selected around RB22 in your fantasy drafts, but to me, there's a real problem with his ceiling. The pro-White argument, it kind of goes like this. The Vegas backfield doesn't have a lot of alternatives, right? It's Zamir White back there. He's going to see a lot of work. And look at what he did at the end of last year when he was the sole running back, when Josh Jacobs was out. White scored at least 12.6 PPR points in each of his final 4 games. He hit 100 rushing yards in 2 of those 4 games. But here's the thing. He's not that much of a pass catcher. He's never been much of a pass catcher. He didn't have a good receiving profile out of college, and his target share per game rate during that stretch last year was still under 10%. Now, there was a recent quote from head coach Antonio Pierce that may get fantasy managers really excited. The Coach Speak Index tweeted this. But Pierce said that White was essentially the main guy in the backfield on early downs. And like I said, people were excited about that quote. Zamir White's going to get all this work. To me, though, the fact that he specified early downs is kind of a concern. Not only could there be more of a rotation in that backfield just in general than we think because Alexander Madison's there, but White's pass catching upside, it could be capped because Amir Abdullah and Dylan Laube are there. On a team that's not projected to be very good, that's not what I want in a fantasy asset. I don't want an early down running back without pass catching upside in a bad offense. So in the end, Zamir White looks like someone who's capable of returning his draft day value, but not exceeding it by that much. And I don't want to draft an RB22 or buy an RB22 just to get like RB18 production. That's not how I play fantasy football. And that's why Zamir White's a sell. Add Ray Davis. So according to Yahoo's numbers, Ray Davis is available in over 80% of leagues right now. We need to change that. You may not really want a backup running back in a Josh Allen-led offense because we know that Josh Allen himself is going to steal some goal line work. But Davis isn't in that bad of a spot. James Cook isn't that much of a bruiser for Buffalo. Last year, they didn't really use him at the goal line. Non-James Cook running backs last year, they out-touched Cook at the goal line 16-5. When offensive coordinator Joe Brady took over in Buffalo midway through last year, the Bills started to run the ball more. They had a dropbacks over expected rate below 0 in each of their final 6 regular season games. Cook saw his rush attempts per game number go from 12 before Brady to 16.7 with him. And that resulted in an expected fantasy points per game tally that was 10th highest at the position according to PFF during the final 8 weeks of last season. The rest of that running back room, though, they were still seeing an expected points per game number that was about 9.5 during that stretch. Imagine if Ray Davis just takes on that role. And there's a chance, a decent chance, that he's better than a 33-year-old Latavius Murray. And if he is better, he'll see more work than what those other running backs were seeing. Davis is built like a freaking wrecking ball. He scored pretty well in my ZAP model. The one major problem with him was his age. But his production metrics were absolutely there. So not only does he have some standalone flex appeal in this offense and in this backfield, but he's the top handcuff to James Cook. So Ray Davis should be rostered in way more leagues. Add Andre Iosivas. So it sounds like Iosivas is going to be Cincinnati's number 3 receiver to start the year. He could end up playing the Tyler Boyd role in that offense. And over the last 3 years, that role has produced between a 14% and 19% target share per game rate. Now, talent drives opportunity. Iosivas has to step up. He has to show that he's talented enough to play that role. But when you add in Jamar Chase's contract issue, we may get some interesting production from Iosivas here in week 1 against the Patriots. So to me, he's worth a stash. Though I am long-term, I am of the belief that rookie Jermaine Burton still has a higher ceiling than what Iosivas will provide. Buy Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin. So we rarely see big seasons from running backs who have rookie quarterbacks handing them the ball. But I'm willing to make an exception to the rule with this Broncos backfield this year. You guys have heard me say it 1,000 times this offseason. Sean Payton-led teams love to target running backs. The Broncos were first in the league last year in running back target share. And Sean Payton's teams since 2011 own 8 of the top 17 team running back target share seasons. We now officially know that Samaje Perine is no longer in Denver. That leaves that backfield to Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, and Blake Watson. Estime and Watson are rookie running backs. They're probably not going to get first crack in that backfield. It's probably going to be a combo of Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin. Now, Williams is the one who has the most potential, there's no doubt. He's the one who could be a true bell cow in that backfield. But don't dismiss McLaughlin. He was top 10 in the league last year in yards after contact per attempt, and he gained 10 plus yards at the 5th best rate among all 50 plus attempt running backs. Perine not being there is actually kind of a big deal. He saw an 11.7% target share per game rate last year. That was a top 20 number at running back among backs who played at least 8 games. So without much pass catching competition on that roster, we should expect another high target share season from these running backs. Add Samaje Perine. So since we're already talking about Samaje Perine, let's just continue that conversation. Perine was picked up by the Chiefs, and Kansas City really lacks depth behind Isaiah Pacheco. And it was also announced on Monday that Clyde Edwards-Helaire was placed on the non-football illness list. He's going to be out at least the first 4 games of the year. That leaves the Chiefs running back depth chart to Pacheco, Perine, and undrafted rookie fullback Carson Steele. As you just heard, Perine's no stranger to a pass-catching role. He saw an 11.7% target share per game rate last year. The year prior in Cincinnati, he was at 8.8%. That type of receiving involvement can make a player relevant in PPR formats, especially in a high-powered offense like Kansas City's. And then on top of that, there's handcuff appeal. If Isaiah Pacheco goes down, Perine would become a very interesting fantasy asset. That's what makes him a roster-worthy player right now. Buy Kyler Murray. It seems like every year we get a quarterback in this lower-end QB1 range. Kyler Murray was like QB8, QB9 this year, at least on non-underdog platforms. But we get a player in this range who really breaks out. And there are many reasons to believe that Kyler Murray could be that guy this year. I've thrown this out there before, but since 2011, there have been 35 quarterbacks who hit 300 or more pass attempts with 5 or more rushing points per game. So they were their team's starting quarterbacks, they threw the ball a lot, and they were giving fantasy managers a lot of production via their legs. Kyler Murray has scored 5 or more points via his legs in 4 or 5 NFL seasons. The one year he didn't, he was at 4.9 points per game. Of those 35 quarterbacks, though, 20 of them ended up scoring 20 or more points per game. That would have been a top 3 number at the position last year. Guys, Kyler Murray averaged 18.3 points per game last year, coming off a torn ACL and a new offense that lacked weapons. And he picked things up halfway through the year. This season, he's healthy, he's gotten more reps, and I think we'd all agree that his weapons are much better with Marvin Harrison Jr. in the mix. Don't underestimate Kyler Murray in 2024. Add Jaylen Wright. There are 2 ways for players to sort of climb their depth charts. One of them is through injury, the other is through talent. Jaylen Wright has outs in both departments this year. He'll start the year as Miami's number 3 running back. But unlike a lot of backup runners, Wright has multiple outs to get more work. With the Dolphins opting for more of a committee approach, either Devon Achane or Raheem Mostert can get hurt. If one of those 2 events happens, then Jaylen Wright is all of a sudden going to get a decent workload in one of the most efficient offenses in football. And Wright, just like Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, he fits this offense really well. His production profile was solid enough coming out of Tennessee, and most importantly, he's got the speed element that Mike McDaniel's always looking for in this zone scheme. So if one of those 2 running backs ahead of him goes down, or if Jaylen Wright just shows up, he should be able to produce. He should be able to get some production. And it may not even take an injury. I don't think his ceiling is massively high without an injury, but he could be usable in deeper formats even without one. And right now, he's only rostered in 21% of Yahoo leagues. That number needs to be higher. Add Luke McGaffrey. So we saw Cliff Kingsbury coach the Cardinals for 4 years between 2019 and 2022. During those 4 seasons, Arizona played at a really, really fast pace. They hit at least 66 plays per game in 3 of those 4 seasons. For some context, in 2023, just last year, only 2 teams reached 66 plays per game. That's going to benefit the pass catchers in Washington. Now, there's plenty of data that says that we shouldn't reach for pass catchers who have rookie quarterbacks throwing them the ball. And Jaden Daniels is a mobile quarterback too. But Luke McGaffrey is essentially free right now. He's out there in about 95% of Yahoo leagues. And that's despite the fact that without Jahan Dotson in the picture, the Commanders have an obvious opening at slot. They need a slot receiver. They need someone to step up. McCaffrey's only played 2 years of wide receiver after converting from playing quarterback, but he had pretty strong production in the ZAP model, like given context and given where he was drafted. He could really carve out a role this season, and that role is going to be in an offense that really pushes pace. Sell RAndre Stevenson. So we've seen RAndre Stevenson in this pass catching role over the last couple of years. That's kind of gotten him by in fantasy football. But what if it's not there in the same way in 2024? What if Antonio Gibson, who's not seen worse than a 9.5% target share per game rate throughout his career, what if he sees a lot of work through the air? Gibson's not only seen a lot of work, but he's been above the league's average in yards per route run in every year of his career. Now, I get it. RAndre Stevenson got a new contract this offseason. Fantasy managers are really excited about that. But that's not guaranteeing another season with a 13% target share. And that's scary because the Patriots aren't projected to be very good this year. What happens when negative game scripts hit? Now, you could say that a lot of his pass catching last year just came on first and second down anyway. But last year, you guys, RAndre Stevenson was the RB27 in PPR points per game. Like I said with Zamir White, I want my RB2s to have more legitimate upside. And there are ways for RAndre Stevenson's season to go south. And the Patriots open up their season against the Bengals, Seahawks, Jets, and 49ers. Now could be the time to sell. Now, if Stevenson is a 3-down back this year, and you believe that he's a 3-down back, that's a little bit different. I don't think that he's going to see as much work as what we've seen in the past, with Antonio Gibson being a pretty big reason as to why. Gibson might not have as much standalone value, but he can dig into RAndre Stevenson's workload. And if I'm wrong, then we're just looking at my first L of the season, the first of many. Add Greg Dulcich. So one of the things to keep in mind with late round tight ends, or in this case, a lower rostered tight end, is to target open pass catching rooms. Since 2014, there have been 37 tight ends who were drafted after tight end 1 territory, who then finish as a top 10 option at the position. A total of 36 of those tight ends, 36 of the 37, had 1 or fewer teammates with a 20% target share per game rate. So in other words, there was at most just 1 other pass catching option on that team who was getting a lot of work. In Denver, that one player, probably Courtland Sutton. The tight end to target, though, is Greg Dulcich. Dulcich was admittedly a favorite of mine last year. He just couldn't stay healthy. The favorable case for Dulcich is pretty simple, though. He had a very underrated rookie campaign. His 17.7% target share per game rate as a rookie, it only trailed Evan Ingram and Kyle Pitts when looking back to 2011, when looking at all rookie tight ends during that period. And Dulcich had a good ZAP model score too. So if you're struggling at tight end, I think Dulcich is a smart end of bench stash. We should learn a lot from his week 1 usage too. Buy Jackson Smith-Njigba. Look, at the end of the day, I think that JSN was really misused last season. His average at the target was 6.4 yards. That was one of the lowest marks in the league. And he led all 30-plus target players in percentage of targets that came behind the line of scrimmage. That's according to PFF. It's tough to score fantasy points in a crowded offense with that kind of usage. This year could be different. You get Ryan Grubb coming over as offensive coordinator, and he should push the ball down the field more. We could also see the Seahawks run with a little bit more tempo. Not only that, but Tyler Lockett is coming off his worst season in yards per route run since 2017, and he's currently nursing a knee injury. According to a conversation that I had with Dr. Edwin Porras, based on the amount of time that Lockett has missed and the bracing and taping that he was wearing during individual drills, this could be a chronic tendon issue for Lockett. And according to Porras, the best way to manage this could be through lower reps, which would, of course, benefit Jackson Smith and Jigba. The talent profile is there for JSN. He scored as an elite prospect in the ZAP model. Maybe this is the year. Sell Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy's currently pacing to have the best touchdown rate in NFL history. After 21 regular season starts, he has a 7.2% touchdown rate. 7.2% of his pass attempts have resulted in touchdowns. Just for some comparison, Aaron Rodgers' career rate is 6.2%. Patrick Mahomes, 6.1%. This is unlikely going to keep up for Brock Purdy. Now, more volume could benefit Purdy in 2024. The 49ers are probably going to see more pass attempts this year simply because of regression. But touchdowns drive quarterback scoring. And even with a strong touchdown rate last year, Purdy averaged 18.5 points per game. It wasn't anything special. Now, it's good that Brandon Ayuk signed his extension in San Francisco, but Trent Williams' status is currently up in the air. And that's not a small problem for Brock Purdy. Williams missed week 7 and week 8 last year. In those 2 games, Purdy scored 12.8 and 18.3 points. That 18.3 number, that's being boosted by a 57-yard performance on the ground. That was by far a career high for Brock Purdy. That's the only time he's rushed over 20 yards in a single game. And not only that, but Brock Purdy last year had 3 regular season games where he had multiple interceptions. 2 of those 3 games came without Trent Williams. Now, is this all coincidence? I mean, maybe the correlation's a little bit weird, but when we're talking about such a substantial offensive piece, it's not surprising that there were struggles without Trent Williams. And the 49ers get a tough opponent in week 1 against the Jets. Purdy is not an easy start in that matchup, especially right now as of today, where Trent Williams and his status is up in the air. The fact that we're already in a spot where we're contemplating benching Brock Purdy, that says everything. Add Colby Parkinson. Now, there's a chance that we see some long-lasting production from Colby Parkinson this year. The Rams' tight end room is really lacking experience. Parkinson got a decent deal this offseason. He could carve out a role. But even without that week in, week out upside, Parkinson does make for an interesting streamer here in week 1. The Rams get the Lions, and that game has a high over-under. And the Lions have been a top 10 defense for opposing tight ends in each of the last 3 seasons. Now, that's not the best evidence in the world when we're talking about a brand new season, but it's not nothing either. At the very least, Parkinson could see some looks through the air in a high-scoring game. That's all we can really ask for with the tight end streamer. Add the Los Angeles Chargers defense. It's always a little difficult to find a defense for week 1 because so many fantasy managers are drafting with week 1 in mind when they're drafting their defenses. If Cincinnati's out there, sure, they're a better streaming option. But the Chargers are available in so many leagues. This is a more usable recommendation. But Los Angeles faces Gardner Minshew in LA. The Chargers are 3-point favorites, and the over-under in that game, it's around 40 points. With a new defensive-minded coaching staff, they could surprise us a little bit in week 1. At the very least, I think they kind of have a higher floor. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribe to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll be back in your ears tomorrow with the first 10 Trends episode of the season. I'll talk to you then.